English is not a Romance language. We all know that, right? Despite the overwhelming amount of Romance vocabulary that we've borrowed over the years, English is classified as a Germanic language, more closely related to languages like Dutch and German than Spanish and French. This is a lot easier to see if you focus on grammar, syntax, and the most common vocabulary words in English, like basic nouns, verbs, pronouns, familial terms, etc. But don't feel bad if you thought English was a Romance language. It's an easy mistake to make, what with more than half of our language's vocabulary being borrowed from either French or Latin. With all of that in mind, you have to wonder, if this common misconception was true, and English was actually a Romance language derived from Vulgar Latin, just like French, Spanish, and Portuguese, what would it sound like? Our story starts in 1st century England, where the local Celtic people speak a language known as Common Britannic, the ancestor to modern-day Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. By the year 87 CE, the expanding Roman Empire had conquered all of what is today England, Wales, and part of Scotland, creating the Roman province of Britannia. Conquered Celtic peoples underwent a process of cultural assimilation known as Romanization or Latinization, which included, among other things, learning to speak Latin. Over time, the regional varieties of Latin diverged from the standard, forming the Sermo Vulgaris, or common speech. In the 4th and 5th centuries, Rome began losing territory to Germanic invaders from northern Europe, such as the Vandals, Goths, and Visigoths, who set up their own kingdoms. In Roman Britannia, the Germanic invaders in question were the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, who crossed over from mainland Europe and fused into the ethno-linguistic group we now know as the Anglo-Saxons. Pause. Everything I've said so far is historically accurate. England and Wales were in fact part of the Roman Empire. People in Roman Britannia did in fact speak Vulgar Latin, and England wasn't the only part of what used to be the Western Roman Empire that was replaced by Germanic kingdoms. So, what's the major difference between what happened in England and what happened on the continent? Why do France, Spain, Portugal, and Italy speak Romance languages, but not England? Well, let's take a look at France. In France, the local Gauls spoke a continuum of dialects collectively known as Gaulish, and the Germanic invaders who came in after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire were the Franks, who spoke Frankish, a relative of Old Dutch. However, unlike the Britons, it seems the Gauls were very thoroughly Romanized, becoming widely bilingual in Gaulish and Vulgar Latin. This is a stark contrast to England, where Latin was the language of the elite, but very rarely heard among the lower classes. Then, when the Franks conquered the area, they adopted Vulgar Latin not just for political and religious affairs, but for everyday speech as well. Meanwhile, the Anglo-Saxons only ever used Latin as a liturgical language. So, in our alternative timeline, we'll say that the Britons are thoroughly Romanized just like the Gauls, and begin to use Latin alongside Common Britannic in everyday speech. Then, when the Anglo-Saxons conquer England, they adopt a local variety of Vulgar Latin, making it co-official with Old English. Eventually, Vulgar Latin becomes the dominant language in the area, replacing both Common Britannic and Old English. And given that French is named after the Franks, it wouldn't be too unrealistic to call this language Anglese, after the Anglo-Saxons, but for the sake of keeping it as Romance as possible, we'll stick to Britannian. Over the next 1,000 years, the map of England will be a constantly changing game of who's in charge today, just like the rest of medieval Europe. In terms of linguistics, there are only really 3 major events we care about. The Danelaw, when Vikings from Denmark conquer all Anglo-Saxon kingdoms except for Wessex, bringing the influence of Old Norse and frequently intermarrying with Anglo-Saxon women. The reconquering of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms by Wessex, which in our timeline made English the official language, so we'll say it does the same for Britannian in this timeline. And finally, the Norman conquest of 1066, where Normans from the Duchy of Normandy on the coast of France take over and establish their rule in England, making their unique dialect of Old French the language of the nobility for several centuries to come. The result is that Old Norse and Norman French will have a massive impact on the development of Britannian, just like they did to English in our own timeline. The consonant inventory of Britannian is somewhat unique for a Romance language. Unlike many of the other Western Romance languages, like French and Portuguese, Britannian has managed to hold on to its post-alveolar affricates, ch and j, into the modern day. The sound w is found in loanwords from Germanic languages, while je is mainly found in loanwords from French, originating from the cluster zia. In the Western Romance languages on the continent, Latin c before a front vowel turned into an affricate, ts, which is now pronounced as a fricative s or th in French, Portuguese, and Spanish. However, in northern France, in the dialects of Normandy and Picardy, this sound shifted to a post-alveolar affricate, ch. This sound shift also occurs in Britannian, producing chink and cheel, where French has sunk and ciel. The vowel inventory is once again unique for a Romance language and varies wildly by dialect. For the examples in this video, we'll stick to the standard pronunciation of the United Rhein, also known as received pronunciation. Although Britannian didn't participate in the rampant vowel breaking of French, in the late 15th century, something called the grand vowel change occurred, which obscured the relationship between short and long vowels and sometimes produced similar results to French. Britannian main, French main, but Britannian p, French pied. Britannian allows for a maximum of 3 consonants in the onset of a syllable and 4 consonants in the coda. It features syllabic resonance like in rhythm and in cotton, and American Britannian features R-colored vowels like and cater or ver. Unlike its Western relatives on the continent, Britannian retains word initial clusters sp, st, sk, producing school and spald, where French has école and épaule, Spanish escuela and espalda. Like most Romance languages, Britannian has lost the noun case system of Latin, leaving nouns with just 2 forms, the unmarked singular and the plural marked with the final s. Unlike other Romance languages, however, Britannian has also lost grammatical gender. Personal pronouns retain the only traces of Latin's case system, each having a nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive form. Old Britannian had 2 personal pronouns, singular tu and plural vos. However, under the influence of French, it developed a formal intimate distinction, using vos as both the second person plural and the formal second person singular. Over time, formal vos came to replace tu in all environments, leaving modern Britannian with only 1 second person pronoun, vos. Some regional dialects have retained number distinction in the second person through constructions like vosaltres and first person nosaltres, literally you others and we others. The Romance languages developed similar strategies for saying this, that, here, and there. In Britannian, chest means this, chel means that, chai means here, and lay means there. Britannian has a definite article, li, and an indefinite article, un. Like French, it uses di as a partitive article, meaning some of or part of. Due to a long and complicated history of final vowel loss and grammatical simplification, most Britannian verbs do not conjugate for person, making pronouns necessary. In fact, Britannian retains very few synthetic verb conjugations from Latin, instead having several compound tenses, such as the perfect and progressive, formed with auxiliary verbs. It even developed a compound infinitive, like in Romanian. Amenj, jumenge, jumenge, joué mangé, jou avez mangé, jou su mangend, jouer mangend, le pomus mangé pour me. Where the Western Romance languages of the continent developed synthetic future and conditional forms, Britannian uses the auxiliary verb avol with infinitives to get across the same meaning. Jou vola mange, jou volia mange. The basic word order of Britannian is subject, verb, object, and is much stricter than in other Romance languages. The basic word order of Latin was subject, object, verb, and this still shows up in the modern Romance languages of the continent, and even old but not modern Britannian, and phrases with a direct object. French je t'aime and Old Britannian je t'aime, but modern Britannian je aime vos. For questions, however, Britannian uses subject-verb inversion, aime vos me. In sentences with two objects, the indirect object can come before the direct object or after it, preceded by a preposition. Je donne la pêche une fleur, je donne une fleur à la pêche. Finally, adjectives precede the nouns they modify, giving us blank vin, or French has vin blanc. As you might expect, the bulk of Britannian vocabulary is Romance. However, due to its history, Britannian also features several loanwords from Common Brittonic, Anglo-Saxon, and Old Norse, among others. Perhaps the most interesting are calques, or loan translations, like tovis, from Old Britannian totavia, an analogy with Anglo-Saxon alne, meaning all ways or all paths. As a general rule, wherever French borrows from Gaulish, Britannian borrows from Brittonic, and wherever French borrows from Frankish, Britannian borrows from Anglo-Saxon. Un, dos, tres, quatre, cinq, seis, sept, oit, neuf, dix. Tots humans sont nés libres et equals in dignity et droits. Elles sont endowed con reason et conscience, et diva age à les autres en un spirit de fraternité. Nous Père, qui es in le ciel, que votre nom soit sanctifié, que votre règne vienne, que votre volonté soit faite, en la terre comme in le ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre journée pain, et pardonne-nous nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons ceux qui offended nous. Guide-nous, no in temptation, mais deliver-nous de la mal. Vos sont le règne, le power et la gloire, pour tovis. Amen. Before I close out the video, I want to give a special shout out to 6 languages and their communities of speakers: Welsh, Cornish, Breton, Norman, Picard, and Walloon. These 6 languages played a key role in the formation of Britannian. Despite the attempts of the British and French governments, 5 of them have managed to survive into the modern day, and there's an active community trying to revive Cornish from the dead. I don't know what it's like to be the speaker of an endangered language, but I imagine these languages must be very important to the people who still speak them. To the amazing speakers of these amazing languages, Diolch yn fawr, Meuras, Trugach, Merci, Merci, Grâce. Gracie de praise, à vosaltres. So that's Britannian. I hope it was worth the wait. I promise my next Conlang won't be anywhere near as Englishy as the first 2. Like, subscribe, comment, share algorithm, and stay tuned for the next Conlang showcase when we'll be taking a look at a lingua nordica dos Açores, Azorian Norse.